Hello friends, we are in month 4 of our Family Emergency Preparedness Handbook, and this month in the planning portion we're talking about communications. So we already did a video on communicating from the county to the resident of the county, but this communication is the plan that you make with your own family and the people that are in your plan so that they know what's happening, where to go, what to do, how you are, that type of a thing, and you're going to communicate that information in a specific way. During an event, a large-scale event, it's likely that we won't have the full function of our communication system, like cell phone towers. If we had a fire, we can damage cell phone towers, as well as if we had Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, we could very easily lose all communication. So our efforts to communicate at that point might be entirely fruitless. But if we do have cell towers and you're able to use a device, it's necessary to use a text versus a phone call. So the approach that I've tried a couple of them. I had one family member chosen. You should have an out-of-state family member because the structure inside of your location can be such that it's overwhelmed. And if you deal with somebody outside of the area, they will receive communications. Their infrastructure is not overwhelmed. You can more easily transfer messages back and forth, text messages. So we selected an out-of-state contact person, and after explaining it about 4 times, I decided I had the wrong person. So
we didn't know who they were.
So I won't say who they were, but it wasn't going to work very easily. So here's what you need to do. Pick your out-of-state person and pick your out-of-state person. Stop, that's distracting me. I'm thinking of what you're supposed to do after that.
Number 2.
Pick your out-of-state person.
That was number 1.
And communicate with them where you are, how you are, and where you're going. So when you think of an event, imagine that you're not together with the people that are in your plan and you happen to be across town from one another. Your out-of-state emergency contact person just needs to have the very basic information. You don't need to tell them all about how you're feeling and all the things that just happened and all of that stuff. It's too much. There's 3, maybe 4 pieces of information. Again, where you are, how you are. In other words, are you injured? Are you bleeding? What is your physical state? That's not funny if somebody's bleeding.
I'm bleeding, bye.
No, you don't call, you text.
Oh.
You text, you say, I'm uninjured.
But I'm bleeding.
Maybe. And then where you're going. So this is the location that I'm at. I'm going to go to the hospital or the church or the police station or wherever your meeting place is, you're going to give that information. The other possible piece of information, depending on the layout where you are, is the route you're taking to get there. So if there's multiple routes, I would want my kids to tell me the route they're taking, because if I was able to go meet them, I would want to make sure I was on the same road and we weren't passing each other on 2 parallel roads. So that's another important piece of information. Do you have anything constructive to add?
Yeah, it's a great time if you have teenagers. Communications, this is a good time to practice talking to them in a language that they can understand and you can understand when they talk back, so you can get teenagers to talk to you during an event. So when Ricky says event, just so everybody knows, it's not a wedding or something fun to go to. An event is something catastrophic that's happening. So I always think of event as, oh, hey, we're going to an event. That's not what she's talking about.
No, in emergency preparedness, an event is a bad thing. And so the event that I specifically think of in Josephine County and even in Jackson County and really Southern Oregon from the Cascades westward and Washington and British Columbia, Northern California, this Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. And so when you're planning for things like evacuations and meeting locations and communications, think of the largest event that you'll experience and plan for that one. Don't plan for the easy one. The easy one will just get tucked into that more complicated plan, but have plans that address the more difficult situation. You're further away from home. There's absolutely no communications. There are injuries. Think about what that would look like. And I know when one of our kids was still in high school and we were just a few blocks up, a few blocks over, it was about a mile away, and I was telling them, hey, if you have to leave school, this is the route you will take, and the only way that you're going to deviate from that route is if there is some sort of incident on the street, or there's power lines that are down, or something that's preventing you from going that direction, and then we'll have an alternate path. But otherwise, follow this street, turn here, go all the way up, make a left, and go that way, and then you'll be at home. So that way I knew where to look if I wasn't able to get any communications through at all during an event like Cascadia.
Okay.
Now, under the training section of month 4, it's learn to use a fire extinguisher. So a lot of people know how to do that, but really having experience with it before you have to put a fire out in your kitchen or something like that is going to be great. You can do that through contacting your fire department, or you can sign up for our Prep U classes. And we do cover fire extinguisher training and starting fires and stop the bleed and all kinds of other really cool stuff in our Prep U class. I'll put more information about that in the information below. And the other skill, or the training portion this month, was knot tying. And we did cover knot tying last month in a previous video, so you can look at that one. It was just for shelter building. Again, skills are perishable, so even though you did it last month, maybe, do it this month, do it next month, do it every month, and just make sure that you feel really confident in your ability to tie knots and secure a shelter for yourself if you ever found yourself in that situation.
Tie your shoes often.
Yes, thank you for that. It's helpful. So the last thing that we're talking about is the supplies, gathering, purchasing, acquiring of, and that's in this month. It's about freeze-dried food. So every month you're adding water, because water is critical for life. You can go quite a long time without food. Nobody really wants to, though. So if you don't want to go a long time without food, then you need to plan ahead and have stuff in your bag. So this month specifically is freeze-dried. And the benefit in freeze-dried is it maintains 90% of its nutritional value. So that's very cool. This is just one brand. I've tried several of them. They are all pretty much the same. I don't know that you can do a lot of variation with freeze-drying outside of getting into things that have different flavors, like, meals and things instead of single ingredients. This one is fruit and yogurt, but I will point out over here, Augustin Farms makes large containers of freeze-dried single ingredient items. And the difference that I noticed was with the freeze-dried Augustin Farms, this will last for 30 years unopened and stored properly. This has a 30-year shelf life. But there are other Augustin Farms things like this scrambled egg mix, and this, this has a 10-year shelf life. So when you have dairy put in or animal byproduct, it's going to have a much lower shelf life. So both of these had a 10-year shelf life on them. So the other thing I wanted to mention just about food storage in general is make sure that you mark your cans with a Sharpie. You easily rub off these dates. And in fact, one of these Augustin Farms cans doesn't have a date on it. And so I'm just going to put roughly the date that I purchased it at. I bought them all together, so I'm just going to give it the same expiration date and hope that that works out well. So why is it important? So as we're talking about communications, we mentioned Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, and I do understand that a lot of our preparedness is around evacuations for fires and for severe weather, but living in this region, we are past due for our Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. It is supposed to be the largest disaster in American history with the highest death toll. So it is a catastrophic event, something like we haven't seen before in the United States. So preparing for that, when you're looking at food like this, just keep in mind that a lot of this stuff, like these bars, they have maybe a 1-year shelf life. A lot of them, that's the maximum. This is about a 2-year shelf life for nuts, another 1-year shelf life, maybe 2-year shelf life for things like canned food. But when you get into things like this is an emergency ration bar, and it's got a whole bunch of calories in it, so you only eat one piece of it at a time, and it's gonna last you for a few days. This has a 5-year shelf life. 5 years seems like a long time, but I bought this when I started my job, and it expires next month. I'm sorry, I lied. It expires next year. So 5 years actually goes by quite quickly when you're talking about emergency preparedness items, because they are just tucked away on a shelf and you really just don't have to think about them again until you need them. But 5 years is a good midterm, I think. I know 5 years is weird, it's like a midterm for me. These are 30 years. This is a very long shelf life, so this is a good thing to buy and tuck away, and you don't have to think about it again. Vary your foods. I would absolutely recommend that you vary your foods, and also consider medications. Their expiration dates, it's not very far out, and some of them will go beyond an expiration date. You've got to figure that out on your own. I know some of them won't, and you should probably know what those things are.
You also want to check when you're picking things up at the store. You want to check to make sure that they're not already close to their expiration date. So not only do you want to think about switching things or transferring the things that you have in storage for newer things and eat the things that you have so they don't go to waste, but think about the stores doing the same thing. So if you're getting a good deal on something at a store, usually it's because it's close to its expiration date, which is not going to do a whole lot of good for storing for emergencies.
Then the last thing I wanted to point out is stuff like this. This is a dehydrated vegetable soup mix. It's just vegetables. And that's one of the good parts about dehydrated and freeze-dried food. There are no preservatives in them unless you get into something that's kind of fancy, like this cheddar broccoli cheese soup mix. That's got stuff in it. But things like strawberries, it's just strawberries. These vegetables, just the vegetables. Keep that in mind, it's just the vegetables. So when you add hot water to this and you rehydrate it, it tastes like rehydrated vegetables. So it's not amazing. It's not amazing, but it does give you, it doesn't give you sodium. What it does give you is a real desire for salt and seasonings. So when you're doing your food preparation, you're planning your long-term storage stuff, put spices in your kit. There's no harm in doing that. And it'll last you for a really long time. You'll be really happy that you did, especially if you're rehydrating things like dehydrated vegetables. So, I think that's it. I hope you guys are prepping. I hope that you're making plans and taking care of your family and all the special needs that you have for your specific people. Oh,
and communicating.
I do want to add one more thing. Things like vitamin C and electrolytes and minerals, you could probably talk about this more than I could, but stuff like this is also very important in your kit. So include a great variety of things in your long-term preparedness. No, nothing?
Amen.
Amen.